The rain started just as Claire Farnham rang the doorbell, a thin drizzle that slicked the cobblestones outside the Harpers' Victorian townhouse. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and floor polish, the kind of place that tried too hard to look normal. Harriet Harper, poised and polite, gave her a quick tour before leaving for the charity gala with her husband. The children, Eloise and Bram, waved from the staircase, both with the same porcelain pale faces and unsettlingly calm eyes. By 9, the house had settled into silence. Claire read stories, poured warm milk, and tucked the children into bed. It was an easy job, too easy perhaps. She scrolled through her phone in the sitting room, the old grandfather clock marking each passing hour with a hollow chime. At 11, she made her second round upstairs. Both children were asleep, their breathing steady. But when the clock struck midnight, the quiet fractured. A soft giggle floated down the hallway. Claire frowned and climbed the stairs again, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The door to the children's room was ajar, a faint glow from a nightlight spilling across the floorboards. Eloise sat upright in bed, Bram beside her, both wide awake and staring toward the far corner of the room. "What are you two doing up?" Claire asked, keeping her voice light. Neither answered. Their lips curled into small, identical smiles. "Is there something there?" she pressed, glancing toward the corner. It was empty. Just wallpaper with faded rose patterns and a wooden wardrobe that creaked faintly as the wind outside shifted. Eloise finally spoke, her voice soft and distant. "We're waiting. For what?" Claire asked. Bram giggled again. "You'll see." A shiver prickled along her arms. She checked under the bed, opened the wardrobe, even looked behind the curtains. Nothing. Yet the air felt heavier now, as if the room itself was holding its breath. "All right, enough games. Back to sleep," she said, pulling the blanket over their legs. She turned to leave, but stopped. Both children were still sitting up, still smiling, their eyes fixed unwaveringly on the door. Claire's heartbeat quickened. "Good night," she whispered, though it felt wrong to say. As she reached for the doorknob, a sound came from the other side. Soft at first, like fabric dragging across wood. Then unmistakably a muffled thud. Claire froze mid-step, pulse hammering. Something was on the other side of that door, and it was waiting for her to open it. Claire lingered outside the children's room, her ear pressed to the wood. The faint sound returned, not laughter this time, but a thin thread of whispering. It carried no words she could clearly understand, more like syllables murmured through clenched teeth. Her throat tightened. She pushed the door open. The room looked unchanged, the soft glow of the nightlight spilling across the scattered toys on the carpet. Wooden blocks stood stacked neatly, though their shadows stretched across the walls like crooked figures leaning in. Eloise and Bram sat upright, utterly still, their eyes fixed on her. "Were you two talking?" Claire asked, forcing a smile. "I could hear you from the hall." Neither child spoke. The silence thickened until Eloise tilted her head slowly, her pale hair falling across her face. "Do you see him too?" Claire's stomach dropped. She let out a nervous laugh, the sound too loud in the quiet. "All right, very funny. I don't know who's been filling your heads with ghost stories, but it's past midnight. You need sleep." Bram's smile widened, sharp in the dim light. "He doesn't like being ignored." Claire's chest tightened. She glanced toward the corner of the room again, her imagination quick to sketch a figure in the shadows. She forced her eyes back to the children, refusing to indulge whatever strange game they were playing. "No more of this. Lay down." Her voice trembled despite herself. She reached for the blanket and pulled it over them, her hands brushing against their rigid shoulders. Neither resisted, but neither broke eye contact with the corner either. Claire turned toward the door, muttering under her breath, "Just overtired." "That's all?" As her fingers brushed the brass doorknob, the shrill ring of the telephone echoed from the hallway downstairs. The sound tore through the silence, startling her so sharply she gasped. She glanced back once more. The children hadn't flinched at all. They just kept staring into the dark, as though waiting for the call to be answered. The phone was ringing for her, and she already knew it wasn't the Harpers on the other end. Claire hurried down the stairs, her pulse racing with each echo of the telephone. The living room was dark except for the pale glow of the receiver on the side table. She hesitated before picking it up, pressing it slowly to her ear. A woman's voice came through, no greeting, no explanation, only a breathless whisper. "Don't let them open the door." The line went dead. Claire stood frozen, listening to the emptiness on the other end. Her hand trembled as she placed the receiver back down. She dialed Harriet Harper's number, then Lawrence Harper's, but both went straight to voicemail. No ring, no chance of an answer. Just a mechanical voice telling her to leave a message. Her throat felt dry as she whispered to herself, "Who the hell was that?" She forced her legs to move, returning upstairs. At the landing, the air felt heavier again, thick enough to make breathing labored. The children's bedroom door stood open wider than before. Inside, Eloise and Bram were sitting on the floor near the threshold, their eyes fixed on the crack of darkness where the doorframe met the hallway. Both of them smiled, wider than she had ever seen. "You should be in bed," Claire said sharply, trying to sound firm. Neither child moved. Bram's lips parted, revealing his teeth in a grin too steady to be natural. Eloise whispered, "He's closer now." Claire's skin prickled with cold sweat. She crossed the room quickly, taking them both by the shoulders and steering them back toward their beds. "Enough, that's enough." Her hand shook as she pulled the door shut. She turned the small brass lock with a sharp click, pressing her palm flat against the wood for a moment, as if that might keep whatever they imagined away. Then the doorknob twitched beneath her hand, not once but twice, as though tested from the other side. She stumbled back, her breath catching. The children, from behind the locked door, began to laugh softly, and then it came, a single knock, slow and deliberate. From the other side of the door, the knock came again, louder this time, rattling the thin wood of the bedroom door. Claire pressed her back to the wall, her eyes fixed on the brass handle that trembled faintly. From inside the room, the children's laughter stopped at once. Silence followed, sharp and expectant. Then, in perfect unison, Eloise and Bram whispered through the door. "It's Daddy." Claire's chest tightened. She gripped the banister for balance, her mind racing. Lawrence Harper was supposed to be across town with his wife at the gala. She had watched them leave together, Harriet fastening her pearl earring in the mirror as she said goodnight. "Your father isn't home," Claire said, her voice unsteady. "You know that." "Yes, he is," Bram replied, the confidence in his tone unnatural for a boy of 7. Eloise added softly, "He's waiting for us." The knock came once more, followed by the faint scrape of something dragging against the floor on the other side. Claire's stomach twisted. "Stop it!" she snapped, her voice breaking. This isn't funny, but the children did not laugh. They only repeated, almost tenderly, "It's Daddy." Claire's hands shook as she hurried to the kitchen, pulling open drawers until she found a carving knife. The weight of the steel steadied her grip, though not her breath. She returned to the hallway, the shadows stretching long and unnatural in the dim glow of the lamp. She positioned herself between the door and the staircase, every nerve in her body braced. A dark shadow pooled beneath the crack of the door, as though someone stood directly on the other side. Her heart hammered as the air thickened. The silence was worse than the knocking now. The stillness felt alive, waiting. Then the doorknob turned, slow and deliberate, as if whoever stood behind it already knew she would not be able to stop them. Claire backed away from the door as the handle stilled, her chest heaving. She darted down the staircase, knife clutched so tightly her knuckles whitened. The phone sat on its cradle where she had left it, its glow almost mocking. She grabbed her mobile instead, fingers fumbling as she searched for help. No signal, just a single bar flickering weakly. She opened the browser, desperate for any clue about what she was dealing with. Typing the Harper's name felt wrong, like trespassing into a locked drawer. Yet within seconds an old headline appeared on her screen. Local teacher missing. Police question husband. The article was dated 12 years earlier. The photograph showed a smiling young woman outside the same townhouse where Claire now stood. Her eyes seemed to follow the lens with silent warning. The article claimed the husband, Lawrence Harper, had been accused of violent behavior, but released without charge. Neighbors had whispered about Harriet's strange calm during the investigation, her refusal to speak publicly. The missing woman was never found. Claire's throat tightened as she scrolled. A detail froze her blood. The report mentioned that witnesses heard children humming a lullaby on the night of the disappearance, a tune associated with old northern folk tales about restless spirits. From upstairs, faint and fragile, Eloise and Bram began to hum. The sound drifted down like smoke, winding into every corner of the house. Claire raised her phone's light toward the wall by the staircase. Crayon drawings lined the wallpaper, houses, stick figures, and in every picture a tall black shape looming just behind the children. Her voice cracked as she whispered to herself, "What did they draw? Who told them that song?" The humming stopped. For a moment the silence was so complete that Claire could hear her own heartbeat. Then, clear and unmistakable, a man's voice came from behind the locked bedroom door upstairs. It was low, steady, and far too close. "Claire!" Claire's phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the polished wood floor. The voice upstairs had been unmistakable. Low, deliberate, and spoken with the intimacy of someone who knew her. "Claire," it repeated, steady as a breath. Her stomach turned. She had never given her name to the children, never spoken it aloud in this house. How could anyone behind that door know it? She forced her legs to move, stumbling back up the staircase. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she dragged a heavy chair from the hallway and wedged it against the children's bedroom door. The brass knob rattled again, harder this time, followed by a knock that reverberated through the frame. From behind the barricade, Eloise's voice broke through, trembling with tears. "Please let him in." "He's cold," Bram added, his small fists thumping against the wood. "He doesn't want to hurt us." "You're making him angry." Claire's breath came in short bursts, sweat prickling her temples. "No one is coming in. Do you understand me?" "No one," her voice cracked. Even as she said it, she wasn't sure whether she was shielding the children or keeping them trapped with something she didn't understand. The thought coiled in her chest like a knife twisting. The children's crying escalated, soft sobs rising into desperate wails, their palms pressed flat against the door, tiny shapes in the dim lamplight, smearing moisture across the wood as though they might claw their way out. Claire sank against the wall opposite the door, her phone's glow the only light on her face. She whispered to herself, "This isn't real. Can't be real." The crying stopped in an instant. Silence fell again, heavier than before, then came the crash. It shook the house from below, shattering the fragile stillness. Glass broke somewhere downstairs, followed by the unmistakable groan of the front door swinging open. Someone, or something, had just entered the Harpers' home. Claire gripped the knife so tightly the wooden handle cut into her palm as she rushed down the staircase. The crash still echoed in her head, louder with every step. At the bottom, the hallway yawned open into darkness. The front door stood wide, slamming against the wall as the wind tore through, scattering newspapers and loose sheets across the tiled floor. Rain swept in, spattering the family photographs that lined the wall. She stood frozen in the doorway, the storm outside howling like a warning. The cold night pressed against her skin, sharp and invasive. Beyond the threshold, the street was empty, slick cobblestones gleaming under a broken lamp. No intruder, no movement. Just the door swinging as though it had been thrown open by force. Claire forced herself to step forward and pushed the door shut, locking it with both bolts. Her hand lingered on the wood, her chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. She whispered, "You're not real." "You can't be." Then it came, the creak of weight on the staircase above. She spun, knife raised. The sound was unmistakable. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, descending from the landing, each step heavy enough to make the old timber groan. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice breaking into the storm's fading howl. "Answer me." Silence. Only the next footstep, closer this time, deliberate as a countdown. Her throat burned as she shouted again, but the air swallowed her words. She edged backward, her grip on the knife slipping with sweat. The shadow on the staircase stretched further into the hall, long and crooked, as though belonging to something far taller than any man. The next step echoed like a hammer striking stone. Claire turned, ready to flee into the kitchen, but froze mid-breath. Eloise and Bram stood directly behind her, their faces tilted upward, both smiling with perfect calm as if nothing at all was wrong. Claire staggered back from the children, nearly dropping the knife as their smiles lingered in the half-light. Eloise's voice slipped through the silence, quiet but deliberate. "Our father never left." Claire's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "He's at the gala with your mother." "Saw him leave." Bram shook his head slowly, his eyes shining strangely in the dimness. "That wasn't him." "Not really." Claire's grip tightened on the blade. The storm outside rattled the shutters, but the children's calmness was worse than the wind's howl. "Stop this," she snapped. "Stop talking like that." Eloise tilted her head, her pale hair falling across her cheek. "Mummy said we mustn't tell. She hides things. She hides him." The words struck her harder than the thunder overhead. Claire thought of the phone call, the soft female voice whispering not to let the door open. Her heart pounded as the question formed. Had Harriet Harper been warning her, or had someone else used her voice? "Why are you saying this?" Claire demanded, her tone fraying at the edges. "What's behind that door?" Both children leaned closer, speaking together, their voices braided like a chant. "We want it open. He wants us to open it." Claire stepped back, cornered now in the narrow hallway, the knife shaking in her hand. Shadows bent and stretched along the walls, as if the lamplight were being pulled into something unseen. Her own reflection in the glass of a framed photograph looked distorted, her eyes too dark, her mouth too tight with fear. "Listen to me," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "You're just children. You don't know what you're saying." Eloise smiled faintly, Bram echoing her expression. Their small voices lilted together once more. "He's waiting." Then, from above, the locked bedroom door gave a slow, mournful creak as it began to open by itself. The groan of the door above stretched through the house, long and aching, until it stopped with a hollow snap. Claire's body jolted as though the sound had reached straight into her bones. She forced herself to the staircase, each step slow, her hand slick against the banister. The children padded ahead of her without fear, their bare feet silent against the wood. At the landing, the sight made her chest seize. The bedroom door now stood fully open, wider than the frame should have allowed. Beyond it was not the soft lamplight she expected, but a depth of darkness so heavy, it seemed to swallow the hallway itself. Bram turned to her, his face oddly serene. "He's waiting." Eloise took his hand, tugging him toward the black void. "Come with us." "Stop," Claire hissed, her voice hoarse. "You can't go in there." Neither child hesitated. They crossed the threshold as though stepping into another room, their pale outlines vanishing almost instantly into the shadow. Claire's chest burned. Against every instinct screaming to run, she edged forward, her fingers grazing the wall for balance. The air grew colder the nearer she came. She could hear it then, slow, measured breathing from within, steady as if someone were standing just beyond reach. Her body trembled as she paused at the threshold, silhouetted against the faint light of the hallway. The void beyond felt alive, pulling her toward it. Her mind pleaded with her to stop, but the thought of leaving the children inside clawed at her. "Eloise." "Bram," she whispered, though her voice faltered like a candle guttering in the wind. From inside the dark came the scrape of movement, something shifting forward. The sound of breathing thickened, closer now, filling her ears. And then, pale against the endless black, a hand reached out. Its fingers stretched unnaturally long, curling toward Claire's arm. The hand seized Claire's wrist with a grip that burned like ice. She gasped, stumbling back, but the figure followed, dragging itself from the dark. At first it wore the shape of a man, gaunt frame, suit disheveled, hair plastered against a sharp chalk-white face. Recognition struck her stomach like a knife. He looked like Jonathan Harper, but not right. His limbs were too long, his jawline cut too severe, and his eyes, empty hollows with a shimmer like oil pooling in the dark. Claire's scream ripped from her throat. "Run! Get away from him!" Yet Eloise and Bram didn't flinch. They stood calmly beside the door, their small faces tilted upward with strange delight. A smile bloomed across their lips, unnerving in its stillness. "He's home," Bram whispered. The figure tilted its head toward her, lips curling into a jagged grin. Its voice slithered out in a whisper so low it shook her chest. "Do you want to know what she hid from you?" Claire staggered back. "Stay away. She locked me here. After the betrayal, after the screams, she thought she could bury the truth." His voice rose into a hiss, each word shivering with venom. She was no victim. They made a pact together. Lies, violence, blood. Claire's hand tightened on the knife, though her arm trembled too much to lift it. Her thoughts spun. Was this the husband, a ghost? Or something far worse, born from the rot of the Harper marriage itself? "You've stepped into their curse," the figure said. His hollow eyes bored into hers. And now you'll never leave. Behind him, the shadows pulsed as though alive, pressing against the doorway. The children's smiles grew wider, eyes fixed on the black beyond. They hummed the tune again, soft and eerie, their voices rising in perfect unison. Claire's chest heaved. Please, just let me go. But Eloise only turned to her with a look that froze her blood. It isn't about you, Miss Claire. It never was. The darkness surged forward, swallowing the frame of the door. The figure stepped back inside, beckoning. The children followed, their hands linked, their humming fading into silence. Claire lunged, reaching for them. The door slammed shut, and the house fell silent.